It's the exact year 2000. People are scared technology is going to suffer a mass blackout, and the world will end. Eminem just released his second studio album, the Marshall Mathers LP, breaking multiple sales records and putting him on the radar of millions of people across the globe. The PlayStation 2 just launched and eventually became the best-selling video game console of all time. A little game called American McGee's Alice released on personal computers to widespread commercial and critical acclaim. American McGee's Alice is one of those games that just oozes with a distinct creative flair and vision, is very much an homage to the cultural landscape of the year it came out in, while also standing out as its own distinct adventure. This is also perhaps the first game that truly tackled mental health in a way that felt authentic and natural, since it's embedded in the game itself. There are plenty of games that tackle this sort of thing nowadays, but in the year 2000, Alice was very ahead of the curve. Today, I want to talk about this game nearly 2.5 decades since its release, and why I consider it the greatest mental health video game ever made. I also will be discussing its sequel, Alice Madness Returns, released 11 years later on PC as well as Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. Both I think are phenomenal examples of how to tackle something like mental health in the gaming space. But before any of that, we must discuss the person who brought this world to life to begin with, that being American McGee himself. For a bit of backstory, American McGee was born on December 13th, 1972 into a troubled family. His mother was a former hippie who was sadly lacking security in her life, and his only interaction he ever had with his biological father was him attacking him after getting drunk on his 13th birthday. When McGee turned 16, he came home from school to find his house emptied outside of his own personal belongings. His mama decided to sell the house to pay for 2 plane tickets for her and a girlfriend at the time, effectively leaving him to fend for himself. McGee, however, chose not to let this be a moment of ultimate despair for himself, and packed his Commodore 64 computer and other belongings, choosing to land various odd jobs while looking for work where he could unleash his creative desires and showcase his computer programming abilities. Eventually, at age 21, he befriended young John Cormack, who was working one of these odd jobs, who offered him a job at ID Software. This is where McGee was really able to pick up the knowledge on game development and design that ultimately aided him in creating the Alice games later on. He ended up working on such revolutionary titles such as Doom and Quake, with many other young up-and-coming developers. However, this seemingly dream career would not last long for McGee, as he was fired from ID Software in 1997. However, he didn't count his time working there as a loss or wasted time, and to this day still speaks very positively on his experiences working at ID Software. He didn't let this stunt his creative career either, and ended up working in Electronic Arts shortly afterward. In the company's infancy, and before microtransactions and overpriced DLC, he wanted to use this opportunity to make a game with his own vision, something that steered away from the science fiction tropes and aliens he had worked on in his previous development gigs. He wanted to make something personal to him. One day, while listening to the Crystal Method song Trip Like I Do, he heard the word wonder mentioned in the song, and essentially this was the point where the idea of doing his own take on Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland books was born. He began scouring the source material for things he thought he could use in his own take of the tale of Alice, and her battle with inner demons and taking back her own mental health. Fortunately, he found plenty to work with in the books, because really, the story of Alice already taps into many deeper psychological themes throughout its 2 books, the original Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. This source material, especially with it being public domain, allowed McGee to execute the vision he specifically saw for his take on Wonderland. He initially wanted the game to have a different title than American McGee's Alice, but EA insisted he publish it with this moniker, since they wanted to have something that would stand out for the holiday sales season. McGee was reluctant to create this title since he wanted to also highlight the crew that worked on the game with him, but he eventually obliged. This will be important later, remember this. By December 5th, 2000, the game was released to the public and received widespread critical acclaim for its visuals and unique theming. It was also a commercial success for EA, selling over 1.5 million copies. So that's the story of American McGee and how his life led him to creating this game. The life of the creator is key to understanding why this game works so well, and really seems to understand mental health so much better than so many other products at the time. So now that the stage has been set, let's dive into the game itself and what the overall concept is. The game follows Alice seemingly after the events of the original Alice novels, lying in bed one night when a fire erupts throughout her house, nearly killing her, and ultimately killing both her parents and sister. After this horrific accident, she is admitted to a mental hospital after being discovered in a catatonic state. She is handed a white rabbit and ends up retreating in her mind to Wonderland once again, like she visited many years ago, although Wonderland here is much different than she remembers. The Queen of Hearts is apparently to blame for this, as she has become a dictator over all of it, and corrupted the land. The game tasks you with taking down her forces, and ultimately destroying the Queen herself. It's a very simple setup, but where this game really shines is in the characterization of Alice herself, and showcasing her moments of grief, her moments of despair, her moments of empowerment, and everything else you should be seeing in a piece of media discussing mental health. Alice has many moments in the game where she feels all hope is lost, and as many of her companions in Wonderland perish in front of her very eyes even. But no matter what, she always soldiers on and doesn't let this destructive imposter syndrome aspect of herself completely bog her down. She keeps fighting and keeps telling herself she can overcome this, through the personas of the Wonderland characters. One particular scene I always found specifically well done is the scene with the Griffin directly after you beat the Jabber.
I'm not sure I know how to lead.
Do your best, Alice. You can only do your best. You can always do best.
To me, that one scene always encapsulates everything American McGee's Alice is trying to say. No matter what tragedy may befall us, no matter what obstacle might come our way, no matter how hard on ourselves we may be, we can only do our best, and our best is good enough. This is a message that resonates with so many people, myself included, and this game does an incredible job of tapping into it. The game is also notable for having one of the best portrayals of a female protagonist at the time of its release. Alice is a well-rounded main character and exhibits many traits people can immediately connect with. She isn't a damsel in distress or some manic pixie dream girl. She's a real young woman with plenty of mental trauma to bear, and is coming to terms with how to take that weight off of herself. It's expertly well done. The game's finale is spectacular to me also, with Alice finally confronting the Queen of Hearts, and discovering that a portion of herself lives within the Queen, further driving home the idea that imposter syndrome and Alice's own internal battle with a part of herself is what's placing undeserving guilt onto her. Eventually, after beating the Queen, and in turn beating her own personal burden she placed on herself, Alice is free to leave the asylum she was admitted to and moves on to a new, happier life. This game stood out so incredibly well from the other games at the time of its release for its bravery and willingness to discuss so many deeper psychological topics that many games, even just media overall, weren't really diving into. The critical and commercial success it saw was well deserved upon its release. American McGee himself, however, chose to leave Electronic Arts shortly after its release. He had already been annoyed at their insistence that only his name be in the game's title, but now they had just fired one of his creative partners, R.J. Berg, who later became Chief Creative Officer of LucasArts. However, McGee still left EA and went on to found his own company, Spicy Horse Studios. With his own team, he created American McGee's Grimm, his own take on the Grimm brothers' fairy tales, and eventually was approached by EA in 2007 about the prospect of a sequel to Alice. While hesitant at first, McGee realized there were more stories he could tell in the world he created, and more themes he could dive into. Thus, Alice Madness Returns was born, releasing on Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC in 2011. This sequel is praised for the most part by critics and fans of the first game, and unfortunately failed to meet sales expectations due to a lack of marketing for the game from EA. Despite this, to me anyway, the game still does an excellent job at diving into mental health and past trauma, like the first game, albeit taking a different angle. The game takes place a few years after the events of the first game, with Alice being a patient of the child psychologist Dr. Bumby, who is attempting to erase children's bad memories. Alice ends up in a hallucinatory state while running an errand early in the game and returns to Wonderland once again, where she is told the Queen of Hearts still lives on in a fractured state. Alice traverses through Wonderland once again while making occasional stops at London in reality, and eventually tracks down the Queen, who resembles her younger self. The Queen tells her that an entity named the Dollmaker is responsible for literally everything: the broken Wonderland, the mental warfare she's been forced to wage, even the house fire that killed her parents and older sister. She uncovers that the Dollmaker is none other than Dr. Bumby himself, who has been using his position as a child psychologist to wipe children's minds clean and sell them off to several different shady parties. He is a sick, twisted man who preys on those he thinks are beneath him, but the reason he was targeting Alice's memories in particular is because he was actually the cause of the fire that killed her family. He was obsessed with Alice's previously mentioned sister, whose name was Elizabeth, When she turned down his affections, he chose to kill her and everybody in her house at the time by burning it to the ground. But Alice escaped and survived. He stalked Alice as a result and manipulated everyone he could to become her child therapist to tamper her memories to his benefit. Upon this realization, Alice overpowers Bumby both in the Wonderland realm and in reality, and he dies by getting run over by a train. Alice heads off in the streets of London to chart her own course in life, not one manipulated by others. This is a story I find takes a different approach to Alice's mental health, and I like it for that. Where the first game saw her feeling comfortable lifting imposter syndrome off herself and coming to terms with who she is, and ultimately believing in her ability to do good, the second is more about her learning not to let others define who she is, or manipulate her path in life, and her driving herself forward. This is definitely theming I very much relate to myself, given in my past I was very impressionable. I've had others in my life who have had a different idea of who I should be, or how I should handle life situations. However, at the end of the day, I'm in control of my life. No one else can define what I do. This is what I learned, and this is what Alice learns here. It's an important message, and I was glad to see it reflected upon here. And to me, that's what makes these two games two of the best mental health games ever made. They were so ahead of the curve with tackling more nuanced topics like this, and especially with a well fleshed out female protagonist like Alice. It's a series I wish had not been discontinued by EA, but either way, has won itself many fans, myself included. I know I, for one, will be revisiting Wonderland for many years to come. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you didn't like it, give it a like anyway. Hope you enjoyed my analysis on the American McGee's Alice games. Like I said, I consider them the greatest mental health video games of all time, and I'll definitely be revisiting them for many years to come. Absolutely fantastic games. You can share this video, subscribe, give it a like I said before. Definitely helps me out in the algorithm a lot. Leave a comment especially, telling me if you like these games or not. I definitely really like them, of course. You could probably tell. I also stream 4 times a week on Twitch. You can catch me over there. I also have my socials down below: Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, all those things. You can catch that in the description. I also have a Discord. You can catch me offline there when I'm not making videos or streaming. You can catch me there. For now though, I've been Noah the Otter, and I'll see you on the other side.